Well, hello again, everybody. Here we go. Today's lesson is on Kublai Khan, and Kublai Khan is actually not Japanese. The first three stories of Jummu, Shotoku, and Yoritomo were Japanese, but now we're going to see Kublai Khan. I know we are on our e-learning hiatus when we did the notes on the Chinese dynasties. I think that was actually the first week that we were gone. I had you take notes and then do a quiz on the Chinese dynasties. The Yuan dynasty was the only foreign ruled dynasty. I think that was one of the questions in the quiz that I gave you, and it was ruled by Kublai Khan. So this is now in that time period. So Kublai Khan actually has something to do with Japanese history as well. So here we go. Let's jump into it. Again, there will be a quiz at the end of this, a 6-point quiz like always. I think by now you guys are good. I haven't gone through and looked at every single person who's done the quiz today for yesterday from Yoritomo, but it looks like a lot of you did, so it looks like you guys know what you're doing. So here we go. Write down the yellow, and here we go. The Samurai Code. The code of the samurai warrior is based on honor, respect, obedience, and total loyalty to those superior. As with Yoshitsune, a younger brother showed honor, respect, and obedience to an older brother. So that was again referencing the story from yesterday. And we saw how the younger brother, even though it was a kind of a shocker into the story, he obeyed his superior by taking his own life. Other examples: a wife to her husband. I know we don't like to say that too much in this culture, but in Japanese culture and other cultures, a wife is subservient to her husband, children to their father, and samurai warriors to their leaders, with the highest position now in Japan being shogun, which means total military ruler. Again, we learned that at the very end yesterday. The emperor too shared the very highest level of respect, but his role was a religious and spiritual leader and as a symbolic figure representing the divine heritage of Japan. So here's this phrase: divine heritage. We're going to see this term a lot today because this is where we really start to step up and see that Japan, the Japanese people really feel that Japan, they're going to hold true to that divine heritage, that God inspired, God created heritage. If you remember from the very first story of Jummu, they believed that the god and goddess came down and created the Japanese islands, right? With the spear and the rainbow bridge and all of that. Well, they're going to continue to carry that idea through this divine heritage. We're going to see that phrase a lot today. Though the emperors lived in splendor, their powers are rarely a threat to the shogun's power. So I think I mentioned yesterday that even though there's an emperor, the shogun, who has the military power, is the one who really is in charge. And they have the true power. The shoguns do. So let's talk about Kublai Khan. About 70 years after the death of Yoritomo, who was Japan's first shogun, that's what we learned yesterday, the strength of the samurai code and the bravery of the samurai warriors was tested. Kublai Khan, the cruel and powerful leader in Mongolia, had conquered many lands, maintaining his power through sheer terror. So again, we talked a few weeks ago before break how he conquered China, and he was kind of marching all the way around Asia, looking to conquer it. People knew the name of Kublai Khan and they were afraid of it. In fact, he looked upon Japan as yet another unconquered prize. Stories of the ruthless Khan's destruction of entire villages, killing all men, women, and children, spread such fear that many people felt it safest to simply surrender to the dreaded Mongol army than to fight against it and suffer its wrath. Kublai Khan was in a sense collecting Asia. He collected Korea, he already had Mongolia, he collected China, and he looked at Japan and go, nah, I need that. That's part of the set. I don't really need it, but it's part of the set, and I've got to get it. And so that's kind of what he was looking at. I don't think he really cared too much about Japan itself, but he just wanted to have all of Asia. Now, he had developed such a ruthless reputation that people found it easier just to surrender than die. Because if you fought Kublai Khan and the Mongol army, you were going to pretty much die, and die like it hurt. They were not nice, and so it was easier to do that. They were kind of the bullies of Asia. So when I was in the second grade, there was I think we do a good job at Riverside, and most schools do today, of really squashing the concept of bullying, and that's a big focus that we have. And I'm not saying that schools didn't do that before, but it was kind of accepted that schools used to kind of have a school bully. And our school bully, his name was Robbie, and uh, he was huge. To me, I was in second grade, so I think he was in fourth grade, so he was huge, and he had like a buzz cut, and he wore like like overalls, but like coveralls, like you'd work on a car, and he had like work boots, and he just kind of, and this is in the 70s, so everyone had long shaggy hair in the 70s. It was terrible, but we did. And his was like a buzz cut, and right, so he stood out, and I can't tell for sure, but I'm pretty sure when he walked down the hall it was like a boom boom, because he was a bigger kid, and he just bullied us. And it got to the point he'd come up and say, give me your milk money, because this is back in the day when you'd buy milk cost 8 cents to buy a thing of milk, or 11 cents if you wanted chocolate milk. And my parents splurged and let me get the chocolate milk, because we all know chocolate milk is better than regular milk. And so if you came up to you and asked for your milk money, he said, give me milk money or we beat you up. Well, he was intimidating, so I never took him up on the offer, so I just give him my milk money, right? And it got to the point where our teachers started collecting milk money in the classroom, and they would give us a ticket, and we'd take that ticket to the lunchroom and get our milk. And so so this kid could not like take our milk money, right? So it got to the point though, if we see him coming, it's like, give me your milk money. We just give it to him. We didn't want to. It was easier to surrender than to face the consequence. Now, again, I don't know if he'd ever beat anybody up, but I didn't want to be the first person to find out. So Kublai Khan is kind of like Robbie. All right, so therefore, when Kublai Khan sent messengers to Japan in 1268, stating that Japan was to surrender to him or face the consequences, the great leader felt that Japan would surely negotiate. They surely would. Why wouldn't they not negotiate? Because he's Kublai Khan. They've heard of his reputation. They know he's this ruthless, terrible person, and he's going to kill him. So they're going to surrender for sure, because what's Japan anyway? There's this insignificant little island nation, okay? So the military leaders of Japan were unshaken and sent the messengers back to Mongolia, making it quite clear they would never surrender. This message infuriated Kublai Khan, and he put together his invasion plan that would crush Japan. The bully has just been called. He's just been checked. And people stood up to him. For the first time, someone said, no, I'm not giving my milk money. Let's see what you got, bud. And so they didn't give Kublai Khan his milk money, and now he gets ticked off. His reputation was at stake. And again, I don't think, if it wasn't about Japan before, it certainly isn't about conquering Japan now. Now he just has a reputation, because if they say, we're not going to surrender, he said surrender. And if people say no, and he says, all right, well, I'll let you go this time. But next time, if he lets them go, then word's going to spread. Hey, if you say no to Kublai Khan, he's not going to attack you. And then his whole power is there, which because you've learned this. Bullies get their power from intimidation and from the threat of violence, not necessarily the act of it, because sometimes they don't want that. They just want that feeling of power. So Kublai Khan was like that. So he said, I'm going to invade you. So he's got a reputation. So he's going to completely crush. He's not wanting to be nice about this. He wants to absolutely obliterate Japan. So he formulated a fleet of 800 Korean ships to transport 30,000 Chinese, Korean, and Mongolian soldiers. And in 1274, he sent them out to conquer Japan. 30,000 soldiers. That's like, think of Lucas Oil Stadium, about half full of angry soldiers, right? And so that's a lot of people who, if you're a Chargers fan, that's about like twice as many as you'd have at a game. I feel bad because my old Chargers. I'm wearing a Charger sweatshirt right now. You can't see that, only because it's, comfortable, and I still have a soft spot for them. But Phillip Rivers is coming here. Woo! But, anyway, why am I talking about the Chargers? Okay, 30,000 Chinese, Korean, and Mongolian soldiers. Half of Lucas Oil. That's where I went. Okay. So that's a lot of people, and they're angry, and they're going to come out and conquer Japan. All right, now look at the title of this section here. Look at it. If there's a first attempt, what can we assume there's going to be? You all said a second attempt. So that means that we're probably not successful this first time. So the brave samurai, well trained and eager to fight, met the massive Mongol fleet on the island of Kyushu. It looks like Kyushu, it's pronounced Kyushu. The samurai's individual style of combat confused the Mongols' plan of attack and forced them to retreat to their ships after a day of fighting. The most feared army on the planet, that's the Mongolian army. They were just running through Asia. Again, people would surrender to them if they knew they were coming. Kublai Khan had this an incredible reputation of being ruthless. After one day of fighting, the samurai, they had to retreat to their ships. Like, whoa! And I don't know what type of combat fighting the samurai had. I don't know. But it was so different and so unique that the Mongolian army, who's used to beating up people and killing people and ravaging countries and taking things easily, they didn't know what to do. And they had to retreat back to their ships after one day. On the following day, a storm came up and forced the fleet to withdraw to sea to avoid the danger of being smashed against the rocky shore. So they fought for one day. They couldn't advance onto the island of Japan. They had to go back to their ships that night. They're going to get up the next day. They stayed up all night coming up with strategy plans. And they got up and there's a big storm. And if they didn't take out to sea, their ships were going to get smashed against the shore, and they would have been stuck there and for sure been defeated. So they had to take off and go home. Okay, so this is not going to make Khan happy, right? He's pretty upset. So when the fleet returned to Korea, Kublai Khan was infuriated at his army's failure. Again, the tyrant sent messengers to Japan and demanded surrender to be prepared to pay the price. This cracks me up. He just got defeated, and he says, now are you going to surrender? Right? You know the best movie in the world is The Princess Bride. I've talked about that a million times. Those of you who are reading it now for English, I think you're reading it. I'm not sure if you are. You know it's one of my favorite books. I talked about that before we left. In the movie, I forget the scenes in the book. I read the book a while ago, but I can't remember if it's in the book. But in the movie, Wesley is confronted by Prince Humperdinck, and actually no, not Humperdinck. It was Count Rugen, and they're surrounded in a fire swamp, and all of a sudden there's like probably 15, 20 soldiers around him, and they tell Wesley to surrender. He's like, surrender? You mean you wish to surrender to me? Very well, I accept. That's kind of what happened here. He just got defeated after one day of fighting. His army had to come home. He then sends a messenger over and says, now do you surrender? It's like, why would the Japanese surrender when they just beat these guys in one day? Crazy, crazy stuff. So he's like, no. So instead, the Mongol army representative says, Khan wants you to surrender. This time, rather than sending him home, the Japanese simply put this messenger to death, making it clear that Japan had still no intention of surrender. That's a pretty good signal when the guy's head and body come home in separate compartments, right? And I think Khan's going to get the clue that the Japanese are not going to surrender. So Kublai Khan had never been madder and vowed to severely punish Japan. Now his honor is totally at stake. He's like, ah, like that. Just like, I don't know if he said that exactly in those words, but he's like, ah, like that, because he's so ticked off. He ordered mountains to be stripped of trees to build the largest armada. An armada is a fleet of ships ever assembled on Earth. Even to this day, there's never been a larger armada, never been a bigger fleet of ships ever than on this moment in history. More than 3,500 ships were constructed. The last time for the first invasion, it was 800. Now it's more than 4 times as many ships. 3,500 ships were constructed, and an army of 140,000 men prepared for what they hoped to be a decisive invasion of Japan. The first time it was 30,000. Now it's 140,000. I'm not smart enough to do the math, but that's a lot more. It's now 2 Lucas Oil stadiums full of people who are really, really mad and have pokey things that want to point them and stab them and jab them into you, right? That is a serious, serious army. 140,000 soldiers, 3,500 ships. I don't even know what that would look like. Like if you're watching them come in, I have no idea what that would look like. Crazy, crazy stuff. So look at the title of this thing. We had a first attempt. Now we have a second attempt. Let's see if they're successful in this one. The second attack came in 1281. The Japanese had spent the intervening 7 years training and preparing for the Mongol army's inevitable return. They knew once they put that messenger to death the Mongol army was going to come back. They knew Kublai Khan had enough in him that he's not going to just, okay, so, what, I'll let it go. So they knew. So they were ready. They were training. The brave samurai were anxious and ready to defend their country. The Japanese pirate ships menaced the advancing armada. The pirates would quietly swim to the Mongol ships at night. Then, cutting off the heads of the ship's crew members, the pirates would secretly return to their boats, leaving the Mongol crafts floundering with inexperienced replacements. Pirates are pirates. They're in it only for themselves. They might be Japanese pirates, they might be Korean pirates, they might be whatever pirates, but they're really only in it for themselves. But here, even so, the Japanese pirates said, you know what? We're going to help fight Japan as well. So they weren't part of the samurai warriors. They weren't part of the official army. They were just out there pirating. But even they got into this, and they snuck onto these Mongol ships, and they would kill some of the experienced crew. And they put aside their own desires at first just to help Japan succeed. So here's the battle. When the Mongol army landed, the massive mixture of Chinese, Korean, and Mongolian soldiers, again, all three of those areas, because that's what the Mongolians had conquered, took to the shore again on the island of Kyushu. That's the southernmost large island of Japan. But the samurai battled to defend their divinely created land. There's that phrase, right? Divinely created land. God created land. Weeks of furious fighting kept Kublai Khan's forces from establishing a solid foothold on Japanese shore. So this took longer than a day, but the Mongolian army was still not successful. They get a little bit and then get pushed back, and they get a little bit and get pushed back. They weren't ever really able to say this land is ours and we were able to now claim this as us. And they just didn't do it. It took weeks and weeks. And it was just massive, intense fighting. So then one day, strong winds began to blow, and a dangerous storm was threatening, and the Mongol army feared that their ships could be driven against the shore. Troops retreated to their ships, but unlike the storm that had forced an end to the previous invasion, this storm quickly became more violent. Before they could reach the relative safety of the open seas, the ships were smashed and sunk, scattering the Mongol warriors into the angry waters. Most all were drowned. Those that managed to swim to shore were swiftly chopped into fish food by the awaiting samurai. A little graphic, but sorry, that's what they did. So can you imagine some of these soldiers? They survived a first attempt and a second attempt, and they're drowned, like the ship's being smashed, and they finally make it to the shore, and then they're killed there. This was brutal. Some ships did return, obviously. They got out past the storm, but a lot of the soldiers who weren't killed in battle already drowned or were killed when they tried to safely make it to the shore. And so of those 140,000, I don't know the number of how many actually survived, but it was considerably less. And this was a huge defeat because of the storm that came up. Okay. Now, thanks to the tremendous storm and the bravery of the samurai, Japan was successfully defended by the most powerful and frightening of invading forces. Kublai Khan's great army was crushed. His resources and morale drained. Kublai Khan made no further attempts to capture Japan. Let me give you a visual. You know I'm a Star Wars fan. In Empire Strikes Back, the whole movie, Darth Vader's trying to capture the Millennium Falcon, right? Because he thinks it's going to lead into Luke Skywalker. So he kind of keeps trying to track the Millennium Falcon. They keep disabling it. They put homing devices on. They keep disabling the hyperdrive. And the whole movie, every time the Millennium Falcon tries to escape, they get in trouble. And it's this constant cat and dog chase throughout the whole movie. At the very end, R2-D2 realizes that the hyperdrive has been disabled, and he does his R2-D2 magic. And just as they're about to get put in the tractor beam from Darth Vader, R2-D2 fixes it, and they take off into hyperspace, and they lose the Millennium Falcon. Throughout the movie, every time the Millennium Falcon escapes, Darth Vader gets mad, and he force kills whoever the general happens to be. He kills like two people, how he force chokes them, right? So at the end, when the Millennium Falcon takes off, and the then admiral, commander, whoever, he's like, oh shoot, you know what? I'm gonna die, because he knows that two other guys had died because of something similar, and he's gonna die. And Darth Vader looks out the window, and he's got his mask on, right? So you can't see him, but he's just like, oh. He thinks he's finally gonna get finally gonna capture it and just escape once again. It's like, ugh. And everyone expects him to go nuts and start throwing stuff, and he just turns around and walks away. and doesn't kill anybody, doesn't throw anything. He just was so defeated. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't say anything. I've always imagined that Kublai Khan pulled a Darth Vader. I think Kublai Khan at this point was just like, "Are you kidding me?" Both armies, my first attempt, my second attempt, the largest military thing ever, the largest armada ever on the planet. It didn't work with this insignificant, unknown little island of Japan, and we couldn't defeat them. He was probably just like, ugh. People probably expected him to go nuts and throw stuff and kill people and everything. And he just like, ugh, forget it. And he just kind of shook his head and walked away. So he made no further attempt to capture Japan. Now, the Japanese were certain the great storm had been sent by the gods to help the samurai defend their sacred land, there it is, sacred or divine land, from the outsiders. They called the wind kamikaze, or divine wind. Kamikaze is another misunderstood phrase or term. It's a term later adapted by World War II fighter pilots, but this was still further proof that Japan was not only created by the gods, but was still watched over and protected by the deities. So, I mentioned this several times now, divinely created land, sacred land. The Japanese believed that what ultimately defeated Kublai Khan and his Mongolian army forces was this typhoon, this storm that came in. They called it kamikaze, which means divine wind. And as I said, the Japanese World War II fighter pilots kind of adopted the term kamikaze. It means that they're kind of suicide pilots. They'd fly into a building or fly into a ship, and they'd kill themselves and blow up the plane and take out a building with it or the ship with it as well. That's not what kamikaze means. But they believe that they were carried on the divine winds as well. But it means divine wind, and it was this typhoon or this storm that is ultimately what defeated Mongol army. Okay, all Japan had much to be proud of. Instead of fighting among themselves, it was a time that Japan fought as a nation, preserving its purity and independence and remaining unconquered. So this is where we're going to stop here for today, but this is where we're going to see another turning point in Japanese history. I told you when we started this a week ago, these are major turning points of Japanese history. So today we see that Japan fought against the world's most powerful army, and they defeated them. That's huge. So Japan is now unconquered. They already believe their land is created by the gods, this divinely created land. Now they believe that the gods sent this storm to protect them, and they believe now that they're unconquered because the gods have allowed that. And they're going to kind of carry this flag of being unconquered around for a long time, because it's kind of like, who's be like the Cleveland Browns defeating the Patriots in the Super Bowl, right? That wouldn't happen because they're both AFC teams. I get it, but you know what I'm saying, right? It'd be that big of a deal where you take this nothing defeats you take the David and the Goliath concept, right? And that's what happened here, okay? So that's the story of Kublai Khan. Now, a quick footnote. In 1982, Japanese divers discovered the remains of the Mongolian armada off the shores of Kyushu. Though the ships had long since disintegrated, many relics are brought up still as they were in 1281. This is a huge discovery. 700 years later, they found just massive wreckage at the bottom near the island of Kyushu. To not that people doubted this story, but just it's always good to find artifacts and relics. So that's kind of cool. All right, so that is the story for today. As you guys know what you need to do, go back to the Canvas page, find the link to the quiz. The quiz code is 2284. So click or type that in for the code, and that will get you into the quiz. Again, you have 2 attempts to take it. If you don't get a 6 the first time, take it again. Hopefully you'll get 6 the second time, and that's the score that I just have it set to keep the highest of the 2 scores. Okay, the higher of the 2 scores. If you have any questions, not where to find the code because it's right here, go ahead and email me. Again, I miss you guys. I say that every day, but because it's true every day. I miss you guys, and hopefully you guys are doing well. And I will communicate with you later. I'm going to send an email out to you guys just to kind of check in, make sure everybody's good. And talk to you guys later. Go take the quiz.